If your YouTube videos look fine and not really exactly professional, and you think to get that professional look, I need to get a professional camera, I hate to break it to you, it's not your phone. And I've always kind of wanted to do this. Same phone. You see, the difference between FaceTime and YouTube generally comes down to one of four things, or all four. Your lighting, your audio, the framing of your shot, and the stability. I'm going to kind of lump those together because they are very interconnected. And the settings on your camera, locking your exposure, that sort of thing. So we are going to dive into all of those to get some easy, repeatable steps and settings, stuff you can lock in to get the mental load off. Just practical advice so you can shoot good video on your phone, no fancy film school stuff. So let's dive right in. All right, first off, you want your shot to be roughly eye level, not pointing down at you from up above or staring up your nose, straight on, eye level. There is a time and a place for these shots, but it's generally not when you're first starting out. You want to make sure there's room for some breathing room over your head. You want to make sure there is some, depending on how intimate you want the shot, some breathing room on your shoulders. That's less important than the breathing room on your head. And the way to achieve this easily is to turn the grid on in your phone. And you go ahead and you do that here for Samsung and here for Apple. You want your eyes to be right on or just above the top line. If you are doing some sort of authority, like educational type video, you probably want to be pretty centered in between the two vertical lines. If you're like this is more of a conversational style, or if you're doing something like talking to someone else, obviously you'd want to be a little bit more zoomed out so they both fit in the frame without feeling congested, but they'd be here in the second spot. Or if you're like showcasing an item, it's good to have that at the intersection because it just looks good. It looks good to people. So that alone kind of fixes 90% of framing issues. With stability, you just want to make sure that your stabilization is on. If you are walking around, it's best to, at the very least, have a grip, if not some sort of selfie stick stabilizer, something to help you hold it more stable. And this is where you can turn the stabilization on in your phone. It is on by default in Apple. And then you can also, if you're doing a lot of moving, turn on action cam, but you do need more light. You need to make sure you're in good light for action cam to work, and that'll help you keep it very steady. So these are kind of the pro camera settings in Samsung. You want to keep it to your primary lens because that is the sharpest lens you have. It is your highest megapixel lens. You don't really want to use the ultra wide lens unless you are in a very small space and are doing a one-on-one type thing, or you are doing stuff like architecture or landscape photography or getting like a scene, that kind of thing. That's what ultra wide is for. You don't really want to use the zoom lenses unless you have very good light and the room to do it. Telephoto can look really good if you want a lot of detail on someone's face and a tighter framing of something. But for the most part, your basic standard zoom is what you want. And if you want to zoom in or out, try moving the camera first before using any sort of electronic zoom. Let me repeat that. Try moving the camera first before using any sort of electronic zoom. All an electronic zoom actually is doing is cropping and expanding the picture, which is worth quality. And so if you do it too much, it looks... So do you remember when the lighting in the video looked like this? That is because I just had the ceiling lamp on and nothing else. Well, I guess I had that on, but I'm not sure if you could tell or not. And that is bad. When light is coming down on you straight above, it is harsh. That light's not like diffused or anything. It's casting ugly shadows on you. It just doesn't look good. Pro tip, if someone can avoid wearing glasses on camera, they probably should, just because getting rid of the shadows from it is extraordinarily difficult. The number one advice for getting a good shot with someone with glasses is Hey, can you not wear glasses? Just is what it is. It's a struggle, and I'm right here for it. So yeah, the overhead lights are what most people use, and it just makes you look flat. It puts those shadows under your eyes. It is extremely unflattering. So while phones do struggle a bit in low light, what they really struggle with is bad lighting direction. So I have these LED panels. These were very cheap on Amazon, and I do have links down in the description. Pretty much all the links I put down in the description are affiliate links, which gets me extra money, which is a win for me, costs you no extra money, which is a win for you, and makes it so I can make more content, which is a win for everybody. So it's a win-win-win, and thank you. What you want is some sort of directional, preferably diffused light. Turn off the overhead. Let's say I only had one LED panel. I'd want it about 45 degrees like that, maybe a little bit closer so it doesn't make half of my face completely disappear in the shadows. Unless that's what you're going for, because you're shooting some noir film. No, noir? 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 No. Noir? Noir? Noir, obviously. And that's when she walked in. But again, this is just with one LED panel, and let's compare it to what we had before again. You see the difference? Now, ideally, and this came in a 2-pack, and again, very cheap for what it is. It's not, the best light in the world, but it is extremely good for what it costs. Like, I essentially bought them as kind of backup lights for my home office as opposed to the lights I have in my studio. And this is with 2 LED panels. Now you can see the difference. You have the second light filling in the shadows on the other side of my face. It is set to about half brightness of the main light, which is called the key light. They're called the key and the fill. They're both about 45 degrees away from me, away from the camera, close as they can be, as you can see, without being in the shot or, for me, causing a reflection on the glass that is behind me in this room. You just have to be careful about that sort of thing. So it's the same camera and the same settings, but a completely different result. Notice now the shape of my face, how it's not flat, the shadows being more kind of natural and filled in, and the separation I have from the background. That's the same camera. It's not camera quality. It's how you use it and how you use the light. And speaking of separation from the background, I have right now, I am shooting in on Samsung what is called portrait video, and on iPhone what is called cinematic mode. That is what adds that blur to the background. In camera terms, that's called bokeh or bokeh. I'm not really sure, I've heard it pronounced both ways, but it is essentially the blur you get from the stuff that is not what you're focused on. It really helps separate from you from the background. It really helps things look a little bit more professional, and you can achieve that in both Samsung and iPhone. In Samsung, in using it, you are trading your ability to fine-tune the lighting, and you are leaving the lighting in the auto exposure's hands. So if you are in tricky lighting, you might have to give it up, but that's okay. It's a nice to have, not a have to have. So yeah, one light can do you just fine. A second light polishes it up even better, but it's not necessarily required. That's amazing. If you don't have LEDs, if you have a lamp, you can diffuse it by throwing a white bed sheet over it, or you can do other fancy things like bounce it off of a poster board or a white wall. There's hacks if you don't have specific lighting equipment like these cheap LED panels, but that's a little more advanced than what we're going to go into here. I'm not a professional cinematographer. So if the overhead light were still on, I'm going to simulate that real quick. You'd get something like this. Notice how my skin tone is kind of a weird color now. That's because you're doing something called mixing the light temperatures, which is not great. Mixed light causes weird color. Generally, you want all of your light to be the same. There's daylight, which is a setting on most of these LED type things. And then you've got kind of your warm light, which is in most in-home bulbs. So if you have that kind of light going, you want to make sure that you're not mixing your lights on your subject or you will get color weirdness. So just pick one color temperature and stick to it. Don't need to know all sorts of fancy things, just stick to one and let your phone figure out how to balance that color. And again, can you get more technical than this? Oh God, yes. Do you need to? Debatable. So your phone mic can be fine as long as it's close to you. If it's not, you sound hollow, it brings in all sorts of outside noise, it's no good. 6 feet away sounds like a room, whereas something like 2 feet away sounds very intentional. So unless you're shooting right next to your face at all times so your phone microphone can work well, my number one recommendation before anything else, before you upgrade anything else, is to get a better microphone. And the microphones in my description are excellent for their cost. All right, let's talk stability. When you hold a phone, there is a very good chance that it is going to shake on you. I just realized that I'm not going to be able to use my selfie stick with this phone. And the shaking looks bad. You need to have the stability turned on, but like I said, ideally, you're using some sort of stabilizer like a selfie stick. Let's show what that looks like. As you can see here, this shot is much stabler because I am doing it with actually a tripod that I have closed and I'm using as a selfie stick. And the links to a few of these will be down in the description as well. But basically you want something to help you keep your shot more stable, especially if you're like me and are just a naturally shaky person. All right, you might notice that suddenly the background isn't blurry anymore. That is because I am using Samsung's Pro Video mode because it is time that we talk about camera settings. So here's some settings you can change on basically anything. You can shoot in 4K, you can shoot in 1080. Either one works. Some of the most popular YouTubers today still shoot in 1080. There are benefits in that it's smaller, it's more widely compatible with older stuff. Most people don't really even notice, but your phone probably handles 4K. I've never jumped on the 1080 bandwagon myself, but there's nothing wrong with it. Your frame rate, you want to be 30 frames per second. That's kind of your television / YouTube standard. If you want to be a little bit more cinematic, that's the 24 frames per second. Either one works. If you're going to be shooting in 60 frames per second, that's only if you're going to be doing slow motion. While we're in the manual control, and iPhone does not have a way to adjust this in stock app, Samsung does in the Pro Camera app. The things that control lighting are your ISO and your shutter speed. Now your shutter speed, just set it to double whatever your frames per second is and lock it. So you really only have one thing that you can really mess with, because that shutter speed, you want it locked at double your frames per second. That keeps motion blur looking natural. Too slow a shutter speed, too low a shutter speed, and everything looks kind of weird and dreamy. Too high a shutter speed and things don't have motion blur. So it's good for shooting things like automobile races and stuff like that. It's stuff where you don't want motion blur. Fight scenes, sure. And your ISO, the rule of thumb, the only thing you really need to know about it is you want it as low as possible. Before raising your ISO, see if there's a way you can add more light. If you can't, that's when you start raising your ISO. And the way that you can tell whether or not your settings are good is if you're focused on yourself, on the subject, and the little meter says +0, the little EV right there, then you're good. Another way that you can make sure that really drill down into making sure that you don't have any hot spots is you can turn on zebra pattern. You can do that here, and that just basically shows you lines where there's too much light. So you set it to like 80% and you just lower the ISO until there's no lines. And as soon as there's no lines, you stop. And congratulations, you've set your exposure. And then the most important thing you can do after that is you lock it. When you lock your exposure on iPhone, you just kind of long press and that locks your autofocus and exposure on a subject, and that's what you want. And on Samsung, easy peasy way to set both of these things is you turn it on auto and then you turn it back on manual real quick. And you want to do the same thing with your white balance. A cardinal sin of video is having your colors or your exposure shift mid-scene. This is all you really need to know about colors without getting too far into it. We're not going to go into color grading. We're not going to go into anything like that. Like I said before, you make sure that your light is all the same temperature. And then you go into your white balance, you hit auto, and your phone will correct for it. And then you hit it again. And then it will stay at that number because you have it on manual. And your white balance is set. Congratulations. Consistency in the shot is more important than exactly the right color every second. And unfortunately, iPhone doesn't give you the ability to use zebras, so you just kind of have to look to see if any of your skin looks blown out and shiny. And if so, just kind of lower your exposure setting and then lock it. And like I said, and like I'm representing, you, at least in the Samsung app, cannot have the bokeh and these controls because these controls don't exist in in the cinema video setting, and bokeh doesn't exist in the pro video setting. It's a trade-off, and honestly, as long as you lock it, the automatic one does it fine, and you can leave it on cinematic no problem. With iPhone, you just turn on cinematic mode. So I've turned the portrait video back on. You don't have those settings in portrait video mode on Samsung. Same as the iPhone, you can only change the exposure level and lock it. So just find an exposure level where you don't look like shiny on where the light's hitting you. Just lower it until it doesn't look shiny. You unfortunately don't get the zebras, and then you just kind of lock it then. So my exposure from this shot to the last one is not going to be exactly right. That is just the nature of me showing you different shots in one video. As I immediately break a cardinal sin I just said there was one of. So portrait mode gives you the convenience and the nice bokeh. Pro cinema is for when you really want to dive in and get that control. And then iPhone, you'd need to get a non-stock app for that. So there's an app for that. All right, now here is just some general tips that kind of will help you with any recording workflow. Turn on airplane mode unless you absolutely can't. There's nothing worse than getting interrupted mid-sentence by someone calling or messaging, or you getting an email or what have you. You want to record like a 10-second clip before you lock into recording a full video. You can check the focus, you can check the audio, you can check the exposure, make sure that's all set up right, so you don't wind up shooting an hour-long video where there's no audio. Ask me how I know. For that matter, if you can, try to shoot your video in chunks, whatever makes sense to you, like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, whatever makes sense to you, so that if something messes up, you still have chunks of video that aren't. Plus it gives you kind of natural breakpoints, unless you were doing something where you are specifically doing like a no edit, no cut type of thing where you're just powering straight through. I recommend having multiple recordings through the different stages of the video. If you're going to be shooting in the same place a lot, mark where your tripod is in tape if you are not leaving it there all the time. While not as important, you might also find it helpful to measure and record how high your tripod is. This will save you so much time in setting up. Last thing you want to do is spend an entire day trying to reestablish a shot that you've established before. And again, ask me how I know. And don't restart for little tiny mistakes. Like just power through. It's fine. People don't care if, for say, example, the garage door opens suddenly, or you stumble over a word, or whatnot. It's just, people don't really care. Just either repeat it and move on, or just power through. Who cares? No one. People don't really care. So I kept both shooting this video and explaining this video on the stock camera app on purpose to show that anyone can do it. But there are better apps out there. I personally prefer Blackmagic. That is outside of the context of this video. However, if you are interested in Steve doing a video explaining Blackmagic and some fundamental settings and stuff, say, hey, Steve, great video, really loved it, but Blackmagic, please. Go set that down in the comments. Or just say, hey, Blackmagic, do it. Do it. And yeah, if enough people want it, I'll go ahead and make a Blackmagic video. Why not? If you're getting value out of this video, please do go ahead and give me a subscribe. It really helps me out, helps the channel out, so we can grow and I can help more people out. So again, so as you can see, phones are more than capable, and you researching all that gear, that's just pretend progress. That's procrastination masked as productivity. Gear is rarely the bottleneck. Direction, distance, consistency. Just start with what you have and you'll be making pro looking YouTube videos in no time. See you in the next one.